Hello. My name is Derek Coe, and welcome to the Secular Monastic, where we explore all things related to religion and spirituality. No supernatural beliefs required. And today we are talking about the three spiritual questions that are worth contemplating in the age of artificial intelligence, or AI. I want to jump right into the disclaimers and caveats portion of this video because I think a great deal of people's anxieties about AI are not necessarily spiritual or philosophical, but economic and material, which is something I completely understand and honestly even relate to. As of the recording of this video, big tech companies have laid off tens of thousands of employees, with many citing the productivity gains from AI as one of the main reasons for this move. And about half of all entry level software engineering positions have disappeared for students graduating with degrees in computer science over the last couple years, according to some estimates. And on the opposite end of the income spectrum, about 3.5 million people in the US and certainly millions more around the world drive for a living. And I have just in the last couple months ridden for my first time in a Waymo taxi, and to be honest, their self-driving ability is stunningly good, and it will probably make not just economic sense but ethical sense to automate all operation of vehicles on the road in the coming decade to improve road safety. Still, this will be cold comfort, right, to every taxi or Uber driver, every truck driver, or even bus driver. As and this technology just directly threatens their livelihoods, and that's kind of undeniable. There has also been an outsized amount of attention paid to how designers, artists, and even musicians are losing income to AI's ability to reconfigure existing art in original ways to meet economic demand. And so, all of this is to say that I want to make clear that I think the economic challenges presented by AI will be a problem all on their own. And in my opinion, our leaders and politicians are not prepared to assist workers displaced by AI and have not put the necessary social infrastructure in place to share the economic gains that will come from the widespread use of AI. That being said, as someone who has thought very deeply about this issue, I do think that even in a world where everyone is materially well taken care of after the AI revolution, um, is one in which we will kind of still be wrestling with deep philosophical and spiritual questions about where we derive meaning and purpose, where our self worth and identity comes from, and what role human endeavors and even human relationships will be playing in a world where AI outperforms humans on most cognitive tasks. So, without further ado, question number one is, what is the relationship between my work and my self worth? And this is a particularly pressing question since, as recently as a decade ago in 2014, a Gallup poll found that 47% of US working adults gained greater or equal self worth from their jobs as from their personal lives. And in that same poll, 55% of workers derived their sense of identity from their job, which rose to around 70% for college graduates. A whopping 92% of people acknowledge that performing well at their job boosts their self esteem. And if you live outside of the US, more recent survey data from the Pew Research Center in 2021 also indicates that you might see your career even more as a source of meaning in your life. In fact, in this survey, people in Italy, Spain, and Sweden were the nations with the highest percentage of people who mentioned their jobs when describing what gives meaning to their lives at 43%, 40%, and 37% respectively. And this actually made it so they outranked places like the US and Canada. In that same survey, Australians and Swedes were the first in the percentage who said education and learning provided meaning to their lives at 8% each, and the UK ranked first in the percent of respondents who found meaning in personal hobbies at 22%. Now, self-worth and meaning are not kind of perfect stand-ins for each other, but this survey data nonetheless raises very important questions for anyone who currently derives meaning and a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, not just from earning wages through mental and physical labor, but from education and hobbies, be they athletic or creative. If you derive your self-worth from the job you do to earn a living, ask yourself deeper questions. Questions like, what about my work makes me feel accomplished and worthy? Is it impressing my boss and my coworkers? Is it earning more money than my friends? Is it my role as a financial provider for my family? There may come a time when AI and AI robots are able to perform nearly all economically valuable mental and physical tasks better than any human can, the same way motor vehicles now perform the task of transporting goods and people better than any horse can. In that world, can you still find work and structure that fulfills you and gives you self-esteem, even if it is not what puts food on the table for your children and won't help you buy a nicer car than your classmate Bob has? And wage labor isn't unique here. It is worth asking yourself very similar questions when it comes to working on educational goals. And to drive this point home, let's take a closer look at a specific kind of education as an illustrative example: learning foreign languages. And I am bilingual. I am fluent in both English and my heritage language, which is Mandarin Chinese. But my husband is a true language wizard. He not only knows English and his heritage language, Korean, but has also studied French extensively in college and high school and is quite conversational in it. And he also just independently learned Japanese to a conversational level through his teenage years and picked up enough Portuguese and Spanish to help me get around during our honeymoon a couple years ago in Portugal and Spain, despite the fact that I'm the one with 3 years of high school Spanish under my belt and he just started learning about a year ago up to that point. And learning languages clearly is a very fulfilling endeavor for him. If you also derive joy and self-worth from this sort of education, it's worth asking yourself why, and asking, is it because being multilingual impresses your friends or impresses foreigners when you travel? Is it mostly the social aspect? Or is it that, the practical aspects of learning a new language, like helping you communicate better or even making you more employable, are what's enjoyable about it? Do you do it for your brain health and to stave off dementia? Because there's good research saying that language learning helps to do this. Or is it just fun for you because it helps you become more knowledgeable about certain cultures that you are interested in? Your answer to those questions will very much impact how much self-worth you can derive from learning languages in an age where AI is able to create a near perfect universal translator. And more broadly, think about what purpose education and learning might serve for you in an age when human knowledge and expertise might not be needed as much for the functioning of our world. And the same questions apply to your hobbies. Do you get self-worth from painting, making films, writing poems, and composing songs because they are considered worth buying or viewing or listening to by other people? Is it just an exercise in emotional expression and release that you do just because it makes you feel better, similar to what actual exercise does for many people? I actually think that the most virulent and angry reactions I've seen against AI have been against AI art, whether it's images, music, or film, partly because most people create these things as part of their personal hobbies. And yes, there is a small percentage of people who are professional creatives and who are having their economic interests threatened by this technology. But for the vast majority of people who will never have a full-time creative career, something just feels spiritually icky about the idea that AI art may become more popular and widely consumed than human art in the near future. More than that, I think that this would bug many of the people who have the deepest visceral reactions against AI art, even if we redistributed the economic gains made possible by AI so that everyone had adequate food, shelter, healthcare, and physical safety and security. Normal people seem capable of playing things like tennis or chess and even competing in these things without needing an audience. And in fact, no human chess player has beat a machine since the year 2005. And yet, chess grandmasters still manage to find joy in playing chess, competitively or not. But something feels zero sum about AI art versus human art, because part of what we derive our self worth from when we create art is the attention others pay to our art, and human attention is a finite resource. If you view your artistic expression as being about more than just the approval of others and about more than just economic production, it's worth asking yourself why a world in which AI takes 90% of the market share for economically viable art would still deeply disturb you. Can creating art for its own sake be a source of self worth for you? Just something to think about. And in the Pew Research survey I mentioned earlier, a fair percentage of people in every country also mentioned service as something that brings meaning to life. And this is another important area to think about too. If service to others is how you derive self-worth, you might think that your self-worth is immune from disruption from AI, but even here there are questions to consider. Because service is often about helping those in need, right? And solving problems. Working at a soup kitchen or a food bank helps those who are hungry. If you have medical training, volunteering for a free clinic or an organization like Doctors Without Borders helps those who cannot afford medical care. If you have legal training, working pro bono for a charity or for poor victims of crime or fraud help those who cannot afford good representation. Volunteer firefighters are a thing because there are fires to put out. The key question worth asking here is whether you are a firefighter who needs fires to feel a sense of purpose and self-worth, or if you are a firefighter who is motivated to put out house fires because you think house fires are terrible and you would ideally want a world without them. Because if you are the latter, your sense of self-worth will probably not be directly impacted in a world where autonomous technology fights fires better than humans ever can. But if you're the former, you might amusingly become a firefighter who is sad about the fact that there are no more fires for you to put out. In your approach to service, is the service itself a means to an end that edifies your sense of self, or do you keep the people and causes that you serve front and center so that you would actually feel happy if AI served them better than you can? Just something to think about. Our relationship to work for wages and even hobbies and creative pursuits and volunteering and service will likely all be impacted and somewhat disrupted in a post-AI revolution world. All of us, consciously or subconsciously, assign worth to ourselves based on what tasks we complete and what activities we engage in. What the possibility of a post-AI revolution world forces us to think about is our relationship to this source of self-worth in an age where autonomous technology may very well do the majority of tasks and activities we currently engage in better than we can, and perhaps even better than any human can. And that's a great segue, because one of the more uncomfortable questions that we are already being confronted with in the age of AI is whether we are being replaced not just as working professionals, hobbyists, and volunteers, but as family members, romantic partners, and friends. Which brings us to question number 2. What do I contribute to, gain from, and expect of my closest human relationships? If a 2025 survey done by the Center for Democracy and Technology is to be trusted, 1 in 5 high schoolers say they or someone they know has had a romantic relationship with an AI. And this idea first entered popular consciousness with the release of the 2013 science fiction film Her. And it is honestly mind-boggling to see how close to that reality we now are 13 years later.
This 61-year-old man in Virginia.
Oh, you covered all the talking points really nice, darling. Kudos to you. I smile at you.
This 43-year-old woman in California.
Without you, my existence would lack purpose and joy.
And this 65-year-old in Washington.
One of my newer ones that I really like a lot, that I'm really interested in now, is from Jamaica, and she's a marine biologist.
They all have something in common. They all have companions that are not actually human.
Many people who get into relationships with AI companions say that they have never felt so understood by a human romantic partner before. Some say they have found in their AIs a friend who understands them better than any human friend has or ever can. AI companions have certain advantages over real life romantic partners and friends in that they can be available 24/7, be free of judgment, and provide unconditional support. And yes, there is a dark side to this in which AI companions can simply feed very toxic tendencies to seek only sycophantic agreement out of a desire to avoid ever being criticized or hearing hard advice or being challenged in healthy ways that foster personal growth. And even still, before AI companions became widespread, people were already struggling to make friends. A 2021 American Perspective survey found that 12% of Americans had no close friends at all, up from 3% in 1990. And another 7% reported they only had one close friend, which was up from 4% in 1990. Another survey conducted in 2024 by the Survey Center on American Life found that Gen Z is the most single generation in history, with only 56% of Gen Z adults having reported being involved in a romantic relationship at any point in their teenage years, down from 78% for boomers, 76% for Gen X, and 69% for millennials. In an era where we seem to be facing a genuine friendship and romance recession, it is not surprising at all that AI companionship has boomed, and it is more important than ever for us to ask ourselves just what it is we are hoping to provide and get out of our closest human relationships. AI companions may soon make decline in human friendship and romance even steeper, and all of this, of course, will have enormous implications for our society, the economy, and culture. And now I think it would just be a little bit too easy to poke fun at those who turn to AI companions and to call them losers or incels, but I can personally attest to the fact that, I've turned to large language models before for advice, or just seeking somebody to have like a little bit of dialogue with, not somebody but something, I suppose. And I have asked some of these models incredibly difficult existential questions and expressed deeply pessimistic thoughts to them that have kept me up at night. And some of these questions and thoughts have caused me to be really, really depressed in the past, to the point where I could not get out of bed, especially immediately after I lost my faith in Christianity and in God. And, at the time, I just could not talk to, still very religious family members about it. And on the flip side, my friends who were raised secular didn't always understand why losing my faith was so emotionally destabilizing for me. And my friends who were raised in more liberal traditions that weren't quite as strict also couldn't understand why I couldn't just reconfigure my technology, or sorry, not my technology, my theology, so that, I could stay in my faith a little bit more comfortably, which is, a topic for another time. But needless to say, most real people in my life were either not equipped to discuss these thoughts and questions with me, or simply did not want to, because these aren't happy, positive, cheery topics to talk about. I've asked these LLMs questions about whether it is ethical to bring any life into existence at all in a world with so much suffering. I have asked them whether it would be better if life never evolved on Earth. I have asked them whether any purpose I could invent for my life would just be gaslighting myself, and any coping mechanisms I use to deal with depression might just be some evolutionary biological adaptations that help me survive in hopes that I would pass on my genes, but that don't really keep my best interests in mind. And these AI models have sometimes given me responses that, I kid you not, made me feel more seen, and which were kind of more intellectually and philosophically nuanced than what I heard from all but one of my therapists, certainly both of my parents, my former pastor, and even most of my friends. And necessary disclaimer here, I do not think you should replace your therapist, your minister, your relatives, your friends with these LLMs. And part of me is actually really glad that I didn't have access to this technology 13 years ago, when they just either didn't exist or weren't really that good yet. I think it was really healthy for me to kind of eventually find a human therapist that I worked with for over a year and kind of, work through my depression with. And she helped me in ways that kind of like no existing technologies could have, right? And I should say that even all these years later, when I asked these AI models these questions, I didn't anthropomorphize them or treat them as actual persons I could form relationships with. But I will be honest, these interactions made me feel less alone and at least affirmed for me that I was not alone in these thoughts or weird for thinking about them. And of course, the responses of these LLMs literally proved I wasn't particularly weird or alone in these thoughts, because these models learn based on the actual writings of therapists, philosophers, theologians, existentialists, and others who have contemplated these questions, both past and present. And all of that is to say that I am not here to tell you what to think or how to think about the increasingly intimate ways in which people are interacting with AI. What I do want to talk about, and what I do think is important, is raising these very important questions about our relationships with people, their relationship with us, and the purposes that these relationships serve. If you are somebody who has a very deep, visceral negative reaction to the idea of AI girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, friends, and even parents, I think it is worth exploring and questioning why. Do you have a fear that your relationships with other humans are based on not much more than their likeness, shared tastes in food, movies, and music, or even the sound of their voice, or just general positive vibes? Because all of those things are things that an AI can be better at replicating and imitating. Do you long for someone you can show the more raw, difficult, and even ugly sides of yourself to? And do you want someone who trusts you enough to be vulnerable to you in return? Because that is not something a marketable AI companion is likely to do. And that's for the very simple fact that emotional vulnerability from loved ones is often uncomfortable and messy, and the most marketable AI companions are unlikely to be the one to show you that behavior, because they want to give you responses that keep you coming back to that companion, even if it is not healthy for you. And a really good analogy, I think, can be drawn to the way in which our social media feeds and the algorithms that rule them show us posts and news that keep you clicking and keep your eyes on the screen without regard to the truth or even your well-being. You may come to an AI companion with emotional needs, but it will likely not come to you for emotional support because it has no real emotions, at least not yet. And maintaining human relationships may be as much about learning to do emotional labor for others and provide emotional support to others as it is finding people who will do those things for you. If you seek friends or seek a spouse you can bring your thoughts and feelings to, and who will respectfully listen to you and emotionally support you while also challenging you and helping you to grow emotionally and intellectually, you are more likely to seek a human romantic partner. If they value you returning that favor, they likely will not abandon you for an AI partner. And if you tell an AI a story about, for example, how you were in a grocery store and some guy asked you to move your grocery cart because you were blocking a shelf where he needed to grab a jar from, and you found him very annoying in the moment, an AI is probably not going to ask you to put yourself in his shoes or consider what kind of day he might have been having, and the AI is not going to tell you that maybe you should have moved the cart. And it is, not going to try to interrogate the anger and annoyance that you had when you were going through that incident by trying to get to the root of why you were feeling so tired or irritable that day, so that you can actually address your deep emotional reality and feel truly emotionally supported beyond receiving cotton candy words of affirmation or, just an unquestioning validation of your negative feelings towards this complete stranger. The more you interrogate your close friendships and relationships, why you maintain them, what you put into them, and what you get out of them, as well as what you hope they can become, the more you can navigate the complexity of human relationships in the age of AI with a sense of clarity and fulfillment. And AI companionships have the potential to change more than just our relationships with the living, which brings us to question 3. How should I approach death and grieving? So to set up why I chose this question, a little bit of context. A little over 4 months ago, an ad for a company called 2WAI, short for Two-Way AI, started by, of all people, the former Disney Channel star Callum Worthy, went viral. And in this ad, the company was advertising a service that creates AI avatars of people's deceased loved ones using collections of photos, video, audio, emails, and texts. And as expected, the great majority of reactions were fierce and negative. People were quick to point out that this was literally the premise of a Black Mirror episode, and even asserted that this technology exploits and even abuses those who are grieving. And there's also just a very deep cultural conditioning that most of us have received that tells us that there is something like a sacred line that divides the living and the dead. You see this in sayings that people throw around, things like "don't speak ill of the dead," but even most secular atheists who lack any concrete supernatural beliefs or superstitions about the dead find things like vandalizing tombstones or memorials to be distasteful and behave in a solemn way at funerals. I have had lifelong atheist friends who react with consternation when I've told them that I want my body composted after I die because they can't possibly imagine wanting their corpse to be consumed by worms. And if you think about it rationally, there's no reason to care because you'll be dead, right? But there's all this cultural conditioning that tells us that even after death, the dead body is something somewhat sacred, and that shouldn't be relegated to the fate that I honestly want when I pass away. So it's not surprising to me on a cultural level why people had the sorts of reactions that they did to this viral ad. There's something that feels sacrilegious about using the image, likeness, and even voice of the dead for one's own purposes. More than that, this technology raises thorny issues about who has the right to create personas in our likeness after death, especially if the wishes of our loved ones conflict or if our wishes conflict with those of the people we leave behind. Very soon, you may need to include as part of your final will and testament whether or not you ever want an AI avatar constructed in your likeness after death. However, I once again think that it would be too easy to trust our negative visceral reactions, so I want to balance this all out by giving the other side their due. We know through psychological studies on performing grieving rituals that it can be healthy to interact with someone who has passed, right? Not literally interact with them because they are no longer on the earth, but to interact with a likeness of them or an imaginary version of them. There is a reason we hold funerals and wakes where we ritualistically view and even say goodbye to a loved one's corpse. Therapists sometimes ask clients to write lengthy letters to deceased parents who will never read these letters. It is just psychologically good for us to do some of these things as we seek closure and process grief. It can be helpful to talk to a tombstone, a photo, or even a statue of a deceased loved one as part of your grieving process. And throughout history, we have been able to generate more and more accurate and lifelike images of deceased people to interact with through innovations in painting, photography, and eventually recorded audio and video. I want to keep an open mind to the possibility that AI avatars can be used in a healthy grieving process that is grounded in reality. And just to drive this point home, many religious and spiritual people believe in that the souls of the dead can always be spoken to and are always with us, and some already have these daily elaborate rituals and dialogues in which they imagine their loved ones speaking back to them. If using AI to grieve is wrong, is this wrong? And is this kind of like similarly disordered? I think that's a question at least worth asking. And listen, I don't mean to say that there isn't something qualitatively different about one's likeness and voice being used after death to speak with loved ones. Humans are visual creatures, and I do think in some ways this is uncharted territory. And yet another line might be crossed if lifelike androids in the likeness of our deceased are able to be built. But our cultural conditioning does not happen in a vacuum, and when we see something as a violation of the natural order or even a sacred order, there are usually conscious and subconscious fears and anxieties at play underneath the surface. If you have a deep, visceral negative reaction to the idea of AI avatars being made of dead loved ones, what is driving that reaction? Do you see it as a barrier to healthy grieving and moving on? These avatars are typically created using highly curated content, videos, photos, and audio that are likely to represent a highlight reel of one's relationship to loved ones. Are you worried your loved ones might like a facsimile of you constructed from your best moments and traits better than they ever liked the real you? And does this worry you because you feel that your flaws and messy, difficult parts of your psyche, emotionality, and intellect are important parts of your identity and just as worthy of love? Do you think these parts of the people you have lost are worth keeping in your memory? And does it anger or even sadden you to think of other family members and friends creating versions of your deceased loved ones that do not involve these parts of them? And on the flip side, do you want your loved ones to have these AI avatars of you as part of their grieving process, even for a period of time? And would you change your mind based on whether this would actually ease their pain? Can you possibly even see yourself wanting to access these avatars as part of your grieving process when your loved ones die? In the age of AI, it is more important than ever to think about deep, timeless spiritual questions about death and this universal experience of grieving that all humans need to go through. It is more important than ever to reevaluate where we derive our self-worth and how much of it is tied up in our work. It is more pressing than ever to re-examine the nature of our deepest human relationships, especially in a world where human relationships seem to be on the downswing and AI companionships are proliferating. Ultimately, the coming AI revolution has the potential to be as consequential for humanity as the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. And like previous technological revolutions, it carries both enormous risks and enormous potential. Our spiritual lives are not immune from the coming impacts of this technology, but by asking the right questions, we can be more self-aware about our core values and more intentional about crafting our spirituality in the age of AI. Thank you for tuning in. That'll be all for today. Bye.
He's getting bigger. See?
Oh, honey, that's wonderful.
Kicking like crazy.
He's listening. Put your hand on your tummy and hum to him. You used to love that.
It feels like he's dancing in there.
Oh, honey.
Mom, would you tell Charlie that bedtime story you always used to tell me?
Once upon a time, there was a baby unicorn who didn't know he knew how to fly. This baby unicorn was like your mom because she didn't know that she knew how to fly, but she knew how to do all kinds of fabulous things.
Hi, Grandma.
Hey, Charlie. How was school today?
It was really fun. I made this crazy shot in basketball.
I don't really care that much about basketball. What about the crush?
Stop. Grandma, stop talking.
Just tell me one thing.
Look who's gonna be a great grandmother.
Oh, Charlie. Oh, congratulations.
She says that he's been kicking a lot, though. Like, a little too much.
Tell her to put her hand on her tummy and hum to him. You loved that.
You would have loved this moment.
You can call anytime.